So now I need my containers to be able to talk to each other. And for that, I'm going to place them on an overlay network. So an overlay network, I said earlier this morning that it was a little bit like a multi-point VPN. It's a really rough approximation. An overlay network, it's technically VXLAN encapsulation. So that's Ethernet packets inside UDP packets. And if we were to sniff network traffic between our instances, when the containers talk to each other, we would see a bunch of UDP packets. And when you open those UDP packets, instead we have Ethernet packets, and then we have the IP frames between the containers. This VXLAN protocol, it's not something Docker specific at all. I can't remember if this was started by Cisco or by another equipment vendor, but it's something backed by a bunch of equipment vendors. There is a VXLAN implementation in the kernel, and that's the thing that Docker is using. If you are familiar with GRE, it's pretty close to GRE in the sense that the VXLAN interface looks a little bit like a tunnel, except that it can be a multi-point tunnel. So then there is a neighbor table, a little bit like the ARP table, but so that the VXLAN code in the network knows to which node to send each packet instead of just being like point-to-point tunnel. So we are going to create one of those networks. Let's create our overlay network. Docker network create. I'm going to call it Docker coins, and I'm going to indicate -- driver overlay. If I don't put -- driver overlay, I'm going to get just a simple local Linux bridge, and that won't do for Swarm deployment. All right, that's it. My network is created. Let's have a look. Docker network ls. This is the list of all the networks currently known to my Docker node. So I have this is the default bridge, like when you do Docker run, that's where the container ends up. None is a pseudo network. Like if you put a container on the none network, then it means that it's not connected to the network, so it can't talk to the outside world. Hosts is a kind of special magic network. When you put a container on the host network, that container has access to all the network interfaces of the host. And we will see later an example of that. Then I have two networks that are specific to Swarm mode. Docker GW bridge. You can think of that as the default gateway. Like that's the outgoing gateway. Like containers of Swarm mode go out through that special interface. And there is ingress. Ingress is also specific to Swarm mode, and you can think of it as like the DMZ. Like when you have inbound on your nodes, there is like the IPVS load balancing layer, and then it has to go to the specific backend, and it goes to the specific backend through the ingress network. All right, closely we can see that two networks, like the Docker coins network I just created and that ingress kind of DMZ style network, have a scope of Swarm instead of local. And if we look in the net, see that they have an ID that is letters and numbers, as opposed to the other ones where it's basically hexadecimal. So this is a little thing on the back of your mind when you're like troubleshooting stuff. When you see an ID that has hexadecimal, you know that it's a, let's say, Docker classic object. When you see all letters and numbers, you know that it's Git. It's kind of on purpose because it helps when you see an ID, it gives a kind of hint of what's going on. So in that case, I know, okay, this is a global network. It's on my whole Swarm. This is a local network. It only exists on this node. Okay. Something to know, in Docker 1.12, once you create an overlay network, like my Docker coins network, you would expect to be able to do docker run -- net Docker coins to say, I want to create a container on that network. In Docker 1.12, that won't work. Why? Because when you want to put a container on an overlay network, you have to allocate an IP address for that container. And that IP address allocation is something that happens on the raft level. remember my silly metaphor with the table and we put things on the table. If you are a manager node, great, you can do that. You have access to that thing. But if you are a worker node, you don't have access to the Raft log, so you have no way to allocate an IP address for the container. And so when we released 1.12, we decided that the code path for Docker run should not be changed because, as I said earlier, we don't have an LTS release yet. So we wanted absolutely to keep things safe. In Docker 1.13, we add the option that you can create an overlay network that is attachable, and then you can use Docker run --net to drop into that network. So in that case, it enables a new code path. But basically, the Docker run code path is still the same, except there is that special case for attachable networks. But if you're like, I'm not too sure about that whole SwarmKit stuff and I'm sticking to Docker Classic, you can deploy Docker 1.13 without SwarmKit and you will still get exactly the same code path as Docker 1.11.